If you or someone you know have ever experienced sleep paralysis, then you want to stop and save this video. You want to watch this video until the very end. Why? Because I'm about to share with you something that's life-changing with respect to sleep paralysis. You're not going to think about things in the same way. You're not going to think about your personal journey in the same way. I personally have never heard a really in-depth explanation of sleep paralysis. I've just heard the scientific fluff, to be quite honest with you. However, through my own personal experiences with sleep paralysis, I have been able to discover who and what the shadows represent. Why me in particular am I going through this experience? And I promise you, you are not going to hear this explanation quite in the way that I'm giving it to you, because there's no one that I have found that has ever made this connection between you and sleep paralysis. Absolutely no one. For those of you that are new, my name is Lissabeta Kalag. I'm your go-to Vedic Astrologer, psychic medium, and spiritual mentor. You can visit my website, AstroDevi.com, where you could book a personal appointment with me, or you could contact me with your questions, or you could even DM me at AstroDevi333 with your questions. So please do like, share, save this video for future reference. So some of you have never heard of sleep paralysis. I'm going to explain to you what it is. Modern science will describe sleep paralysis as like this temporary state where your mind wakes up, but the body's still in like REM sleep, okay? And you're in a stage where your brain is, for better word, like the muscles are paralyzed, preventing you from acting out your dream, preventing you from moving and speaking. And so they say that you're in like this in-between state where you're unable to move or speak and can experience something like a vivid dream, imaginary blending into your waking awareness, right? And they're saying that often because of like the window that you're in, you're seeing a shadow figure because you're in that tense space, you know. And they're saying that it feels really tense, it feels really real, and that there's like a neurological overlap between dreaming and your waking consciousness, okay? And they say that it typically passes within a few seconds, and then, you know, you're back to normal. Mainstream spiritual groups, religious groups will say that this is attacked by a demon, that you're being visited by evil spirits, that, you know, this is a manifestation of your own negativity, or that this is like some sort of like astral projection. I have a very different explanation, and you know what? I feel it to be the most accurate delineation of sleep paralysis. I also feel that my explanation is actually going to make a lot more sense to you, and I do feel that after you watch this video, you'll feel more at peace with your experiences, and that it's going to give you a lot more answers as to why you had that experience in the first place. So sleep paralysis, it happens when the body, you know, is frozen and the conscious mind starts to loosen its grip. But really what's happening is that your consciousness is literally between two-dimensional points. You're still grounded in the physical world, right? But yet you're still like in this astral world. And, you know, I was not, you know, looking back, I was not the only one to experience sleep paralysis in my family. Several women in my family have experienced sleep paralysis. And, you know, as I was growing up, I was told that, you know, some of the explanations I was told is that a demon is attacking you, someone is sending you, you know, evil eye, or, you know, someone's trying to curse you. And I have to be honest with you, like, none of these explanations that I heard from science, from mainstream spiritual groups, religious groups, and even from my family, like, sat right with me. I just knew that there had to be more. Like, I knew that, you know, I needed to keep on looking, but I kind of didn't know what questions to ask, how to even start the journey of finding out like why this was even existing. So, you know, at the time when I had my first experience, I kind of just like accepted it and, you know, went on with my life. And then one day, you know, I was watching some television series about aliens, and a few of the victims were talking about being, you know, undergoing sleep paralysis, and they were talking about, you know, connection between that and their alien abductions. And so I'm like, okay, so some more time goes by and I'm watching another documentary, and I remember this one woman explaining something like how she and the generations prior to her also experienced sleep paralysis. And I remember, like, in my mind taking note of that, taking note of the things that I was, of the information that I was coming across. Still, like, like, I didn't establish a real explanation of my own, because I was just like kind of like gathering information at this point, which still wasn't enough to provide me like a real solid idea or a solid understanding, and connection yet. And then one day I started to understand and make a connection. And this happened at the time that I had my third sleep paralysis experience, and this was in my 40s. And that, when I had that experience, hence 3 times a charm, that when everything came together for me, and I was like, holy cow, like, why didn't I get this sooner? So I realized, like, these encounters were tied to significant life events, and I wasn't the only one to have this episode. This was other people, as far as I knew, like, generations. I noticed that many generations would experience this phenomenon. And to date, I had like 3 total episodes of sleep paralysis. Once was in my 20s, once was in my 30s, and the third time was in my 40s. And I realized that each event, after each event, it was followed by like life-changing events in my life. Like, something really significant happened to me after I had these sleep paralysis episodes. And so my question was, did this mean that I was being attacked? Did this mean that I was being warned? Did this mean, maybe somebody put a curse on me? Maybe I did something unknowingly bad or wrong? Like, I had questions. Or maybe this was like a sign of some kind of weird protection, because everything in life could be very weird here and there. So I was trying to understand it. But one thing that really stood out and made it clear to me was the fact that this pattern was generational and even maybe ancestral. Maybe this wasn't just me, and the few generations before me. Maybe this was something bigger. And I started to realize that if this is something that happened more than one generation, meaning me, my mother, my grandmother, that means there's a DNA connection here, right? There's an ancestral connection here. And so what do we know about DNA is that we know that DNA holds like the records of our physical features, right? They hold our biological traits. They hold and carry like our inherited tendencies, and which like include like our stress responses and our emotional predispositions, and our emotional predispositions that like were shaped by the generations before us, and through genetics and epigenetics, patterns of survival, fear, resilience, temperament, they could be passed down, influencing how we react to the world, especially in our relationships, right? And so while we know that DNA doesn't literally help us to store our memories, it can encode like the energetic software of our ancestral experiences in the way that like our nervous system responds, like linking our present behavior to our lineage in very subtle but like very powerful ways, right? And so in my sleep paralysis episodes, I always saw a shadow, and I always couldn't move, and I always couldn't use my voice. This was something significant that happened, right? And most of the people that I know that have experienced sleep paralysis went through the same thing. They see a shadow, they can't move, they can't talk. Right. So, but each of my 3 experiences was just a little bit different from the last. And so the first time I was laying in bed, I'm taking a nap, and there's like this big, massive shadow that's approaching me. And I was trying to move, I was trying to call out for help, and I couldn't move my mouth. And so I said in my mind, I said, God, I open my mind to you, please remove this negativity, and it instantly left. Then the second time came around, and this was when I was in my 30s. I was lying in my bed and I was ready to go to sleep, when this like witchy shadow is like heckling towards me, and from my living room, and I couldn't move, I couldn't speak, but I immediately in my mind I said, you know, I opened my mind to you, divine creator, you know, get this negativity out of here. And like this, you know, witchy shadow immediately pulled back and left, and everything was back to normal again. And at that point, you know, I was like, all right, a lot of weird stuff has been happening. I understand I have a gift and I go through a lot of weird things. And so I just let it be, because I wasn't sure how to address the situation. I knew I still haven't yet gathered enough information to really come to understand, you know, like what was going on in my life. So the third time rolls around, as if the first and second was not enough, right? And I'm laying in my daughter's bed, and you know, I'm starting to feel very sleepy, and I wasn't quite asleep, but I was like in between falling asleep and in awake, and I didn't see the shadow, but I felt it there, and I felt it hiding underneath my bed in my bedroom, and I'm like seeing it in my mind's eye, and I'm like looking for it, trying to go after it, and I'm trying to move my mouth to say a specific prayer, but I couldn't. And so I clenched I was like, my mouth was clenched so tightly closed, and I'm fighting so hard to speak, you know. And it's funny because as I'm trying to do that, my family hears me from the next room, and which at that point in my head, you know, the first thing I said was Jesus, and all of a sudden, you know, everything was fine. It went away. I was able to speak again and move, and at that time simultaneously my family was coming into the bedroom, you know, and they're like, what the hell is wrong with you? You know, you're acting kind of funny. We heard some kind of weird sounds. And I'm like, well, why the hell are you just standing there and not trying to help me? And they're like, well, we didn't know what was going on. It just seemed all so weird. So after that third time, I noticed that there was another event, very significant event that took place in my life shortly after. And so reflecting back, I understood, okay, I'm seeing a shadow being, I can't speak and I can't move. However, after this third time, I'm like, oh, something just clicked in my mind, and I'm like, holy cow, I understood. And I just realized like the connection between having these experiences and the events that followed the experience. And so that light bulb's going off in my head, and I'm like, okay, so I'm going to walk you through this because I think it's so important. When you understand what this is all about, you actually feel more empowered about making the changes, okay? So think about this. What do shadows represent? Right? We learned that shadows represent the dark side, something hidden, the unknown, right? So when there's something you want to say, right, and you cannot because of, you know, secrecy or shame or grief, right, or embarrassment, what happens? You stay what? You stay silent. You don't say a word, right? What happens when you experience, now think about this, what happens when you experience like some sort of trauma, you know, in your life, and you're so overcome with like emotion or, you know, or fear, or you freeze, you know? And I want you to think about it. How many of you in your life that you're watching this video right now, how many have you like experienced something so traumatic, like you felt like you couldn't move, you couldn't talk, you don't want to eat, you don't want to go anywhere, you want to stay in your bed, stay in the dark because you're feeling depressed or, you know, sad, or so stricken with grief or with trauma that you're just like paralyzed. Notice how every time someone experiences sleep paralysis, they're most of the time almost always in bed, they can't speak, they cannot move, and they're in a state of what? Like trauma, right? So what does this shadow represent, right? So the shadow represents an ancestral emotional traumatic signature rising from the subconscious mind. Because when it happens, when you're experiencing, you're kind of like in between two worlds subconsciously. Your mind is not very present and awake, okay? So that means that this signature trauma is rising from the subconscious mind that has been passed down from generation to generation. It's looking for someone to do what? to heal it. So the shadow symbolizes unhealed traumatic, lineage patterns that could be in the form of grief, that could be in the form of fear, that could be in the form of powerlessness, and it's asking you to witness and to heal it in some way, right? So this suggests that one of your ancestors, likely many of them, have experienced some sort of traumatic experience, something that was absolutely life-changing, that left them with a sense of fear or powerlessness or grief, that this experience held them so hostage that they couldn't talk, they couldn't move, they couldn't do anything about it, and they probably died with the regret of not being able to do anything. Think about it. We're dealing with the energy of a person or many persons because, and I'm explaining to you in a little bit, someone's trauma wasn't healed. That energetically was passed to the next generation, or could even skipped a generation, but it went to the next generation and it repeated, right? Because it can leave a generational imprint, an energetic imprint on the DNA, turning that experience into ancestral karma, or an ancestral pattern, or an ancestral trauma, right? And so for those of you may or may not know, but Japanese researcher Dr. Masuro Emoto had done a water experiment, and he found that human consciousness can affect the molecular structure of water. And guess what humans are mostly made of? Water. We're mostly made of water. We could encode our emotions in water, and that gets encoded like a software in DNA. Okay, so sleep paralysis is doing what? It's mirroring how inherited karma can keep us feeling stuck while we consciously at some point in hopes to reclaim that power. So the most important question here is now at this point is why, which I haven't addressed yet, is why is this happening to you in particular? Why are you the one experiencing the sleep paralysis? Why is it happening to you and not someone else? Like, why are you, so special? Well, it's happening to you because you are the perfect soul with the perfect journey, purpose, life path, living at the perfect time, being provided the perfect opportunity to do what? To heal this ancestral karma, pattern, trauma, so it doesn't move on to the next generation. At this moment of sleep paralysis, right, your ancestors have revealed themselves to you, obviously not in the most friendliest of ways, because think about someone who's this amazing, beautiful, light soul in the world who experiences some kind of violation to their spirit and it turns them dark. That's why you're seeing the dark shadow, okay? And the darkness is representative of their pain, representative of their anger, representative of their fear, representative of their grief, representative of their secrecy, immobility to do something that they so desired to do but couldn't. So they're coming to you in this form, not to scare you, although it does scare the shit out of many people, right? They're entrusting you. They've revealed themselves to you because they're entrusting you, and they're telling you in their own way, because they do speak to us in metaphors and similes and stuff, and they're trusting you to take this as a sacred and honorable duty and opportunity to stop this destructive karma that is wreaking havoc on your bloodline, right? They want you to be the pattern breaker. think about how many stories, like I've heard stories about people's, people that have went through, generation, people similarly, like, women in one bloodline, everyone's kind of experiencing one thing. The men are like experiencing one thing, like, one family, the first child of, born is always the one to pass away, or, wives always dying before the husband, or, like some kind of crazy experience, or someone, killing themselves. How many family bloodlines have done, like, there's a lot of crazy things that I have heard. But they're coming to you because this is their way of notifying you. This is their way of getting your attention in a very big and bold way, that they want you, because they're confident that you can be the deal breaker. You could be the one who breaks this pattern. So you could be the one to help put your bloodline at peace. So you could be the one that assures that the generations that follow will be at peace. It's a massive responsibility that they're asking you to take on. But the fact that they asked you to take it on means that you have all the strength, the powers, the emotion, the knowledge, the ability to make the change happen. So I want you to think about this. Think about what I said. Look back to every time you experienced sleep paralysis. What event, what significant event followed after that? Usually it's within a 6-month span, because they prepare you ahead of time. That means whatever experience you're about to go, whatever life-changing experience about to take place in your life, they want you to use that as an opportunity to make some kind of change, to break some kind of karma, to heal some kind of ancestral trauma. They're leaving it up to you. And so the question is, are you ready to take that on? And if you are, you know where to find me. Go to AstroDevi.com and book a consultation with me, or DM me at AstroDevi333. Let me know in the comments what your experience was. What significant event followed your experience? How did you feel about it? And how do you feel about it now after watching this video? All right, I'm going to see you all in the next video. Let me know what you think.